Yeah, you're there. He's behind you.
All right, thank you. Good morning again. Welcome, everyone. This next story, The Signalman by Charles Dickens. As I said before, I think possibly, in my opinion, the greatest short ghost story in the English language. Again, I will go straight into it and we can chat at the end. Hello, below there. Hello, below there. When I first called down to the signalman, he was standing deep in the shadows of a steep railway embankment, and I, standing at the top of the embankment, almost directly above him, had the full glare of a late afternoon sun in my eyes, so I'd had to lift my hand in front of my face before I'd seen him at all. But when I did call down, hello, below there, instead of looking up to behold where I stood, he turned himself about in the other direction and gazed down the railway line to a rather gloomy-looking tunnel's mouth and a dismal red warning light close by it. I tried again. Is there some way that I can get down to talk to you? Well, at this, he did look up, and seeing where I stood, he took a flag which was holding furled around a short pole, and he pointed to a place not far from where I stood. I thanked him and made for that point. When I got there, I discovered a rough, zigzagging path hewn out of the rock of the embankment. I made my way down with some trepidation so as not to lose my footing. And when I next came in sight of him, I saw that he was standing so still and so wrapped in attention, gazing at me, that I stopped in my own tracks for a moment, wondering at it. I drew closer and saw that he was a middle-aged gentleman with greying hair at his temples and in a small, neatly trimmed beard and moustache. His place of work was, I think, one of the loneliest and most dismal I've ever come across. Imagine, if you will, the single railway line with the tunnel and the warning light, as I've already described for you. In the other direction, a little further up the line, a small signal box with 2 or 3 other signal lights upon the other side. Two sheer walls of rock of the embankment, damp and mossy, and above, a thin strip of late afternoon sky. Nothing more. Well, this is a lonely spot, I said. I suppose a visitor here is a rare thing, but I hope I'm not an unwelcome visitor to you. He took my hand and shook it, but didn't reply, merely gazed at me for a moment, and then looked back down towards the tunnel's mouth and the warning light. He looked all around it, almost as if he thought there was something missing there. Looking after that light is part of your charge, part of your job, is it not? I asked him. And now he did reply, speaking in a low, measured tone. Don't you know that it is? I will admit to you that his manner was so strange. I wondered at first if I was speaking to a spirit rather than a man. I did wonder if there could have been some infection in his mind. However, after a few more of my questions, his manner cleared, and he started to answer more readily and in well-chosen words. Do you have much work to do here? I asked him. Oh, yes, yeah. They keep me busy enough. And is it hard, physical labour? Oh, no, sir. To watch that light there, to trim those signals and make the odd comment and the record of the trains going past in my office back there. His office was the name he gave to the signal box. To be exact, precise, watchful, sir. That is what is required of me. Of hard physical labour, sir, there's next to none. He invited me into his office, the signal box, and it was actually quite a homely little affair. There was a large oak table with a big leather-bound volume upon it, a book in which he had to write his comments about the trains going past, a couple of reasonably comfortable chairs, even a small fire burning in a grate in one corner, and high up on one wall a small electronic bell. We sat around the fire, and he He divided his attention while we spoke, half between looking curiously at me and half staring at the glowing embers of the fire, responding to my questions about his job with the occasional, "Yes, sir," "No, sir," or the odd occasional, "Well, that sort of thing hardly ever happens these days. I wouldn't know about that, sir." A couple of times during our conversation, the bell on the wall rang out, and when it did, he took his flag on its short pole, went to the door of the signal box, and he waved a signal as the trains went by. On the second occasion, I observed that he made some verbal communication with the driver, but I don't remember the exact words. And then he came back and jotted down his comments, his remarks about the trains in his book. Now, in doing all of these things, I saw that he was exact, precise, and watchful. And in a word, I would have put him down as one of the safest men in the country to be employed in such a job. I would have said that had it not been for the fact that twice during our conversation, the signalman looked up at the bell when it did not ring. And on each of these two occasions, he walked towards the door. And then looking down towards the line with the tunnel and the warning light, he came back looking at me very strangely indeed. Well, we carried on talking for some time. In fact, well, gracious me, the time had sped by. It was past the hour when I said I would be back at my hotel. So I stood in order to take my leave of him. "Thank you so much for your company this evening," I said. It's been fascinating talking to you about the work you do here. You almost give me the impression of a man who is happy in his work." "Happy, sir? Well, I believe I used to be happy. But now, sir, now I am troubled. Deeply troubled." Well, of course, I said that I was sorry to hear this, and I asked what it was that troubled him. That's not an easy question for me to answer, sir. It's a subject that I find very difficult to talk about at all. But if I can try to answer your question by asking you another question, by all means, I said, go ahead. "When you first saw me this evening, sir, what made you cry out, 'Eloa below there'?" "Well, I don't exactly remember," I said. "I suppose I must have said something like that." "No, sir, not something like that. Those were the very words you used, sir, the exact words. I know those words well." "Granted, then," I told him, "those must have been the very words I used. I cannot really think why. I suppose it must have been because I used the words 'Hello below there' because I saw you standing below me at the bottom of the embankment. For no other reason, sir." "Well, what other reason could there possibly be? You did not get the feeling, sir, that those words were conveyed to you in a supernatural way?" Forgive me. I'm sorry. But supernatural. That's ridiculous. The very idea. No. "I've made up my mind, sir. You won't have to ask me twice what troubles me. I'll tell you. You see, sir, I mistook you for somebody else earlier this evening, and that troubles me." "What, that simple mistake?" "No, sir. That's somebody else." "You mean somebody who looks a little bit like me?" "Well, I don't know, sir. I never even saw its face. The left arm is always thrown up against the face like this, sir, and the right arm it's waved, it's violently waved, backwards and forwards like this." And the signalman made a gesture as if someone was saying, "For God's sake, clear the way." It all began, well, just over a year ago now, sir. It was a night A night very much like this one. I was in here, sir, all alone, halfway through my night watch, and all of a sudden, from down on the line, I heard a cry. "Hello, below there! Look out! Look out!" I went to the door, sir. I looked out, and when I did, I could see a figure, sir, standing down close by the warning light, just outside the tunnel, by the rail, sir. And he was waving his arm as I'd just shown you. And again, the signalman repeated this gesture. He was calling out, sir, "Hello, below there! Look out! Look out!" I came near, sir. I picked up my lantern. I turned it on full. I ran down the line towards him, calling out, "What's wrong? What's the danger?" He carried on shouting all the time, sir, calling out, until I thought he must be hoarse with shouting, sir. "Hello, below there! Look out! Look out! For God's sake, clear the way!" I ran so close up to the figure, sir, I was amazed at him still holding his hand in front of his face. I lifted up my own arm to pull the sleeve away, and as I did, the figure disappeared. By that, I said, you mean he disappeared into the shadows of the tunnel? And that's what I imagined myself to begin with, sir. I ran into the tunnel after him, holding up my lantern, calling out, "Come on now, out of here. You do know you're trespassing. You do know what would happen if a train came. Come on, out you come, you fool." But there was nothing, sir. I went in 100 yards or more. I called out, but there was nothing, sir. The only thing I could see was the cold stone of the tunnel's walls and feel the dripping of the water from the roof. I came back outside here, sir. I signalled both up and down the line, both directions. An alarm has been given. Is all clear? And the answer came back both ways. Aye, all is clear. So, forgive me, I said, but if all was clear, may I suggest that you imagined this figure? Perhaps, I said, the sound of the wind blowing through the tunnel at night made it sound like a human voice. No, sir. His hand shot out and he gripped my forearm with his fingers. There was a consequence, sir. Just a few hours after the appearance, the memorable accident on this line occurred. And just a few hours after that, they began to carry the bodies of the dead and the wounded out of the tunnel and over the spot where the figure had stood. Well, sir, some 6 or 7 months went by, and I had just about recovered from the shock and the surprise of it all, sir, when one morning, just at first light, sir, I was standing by the doorway there, looking out down the tunnel. The sun was hardly even up over the embankment, sir, but then, sir, I saw it again. The spirit, sir, had come back for a second time. Did it cry out? I asked him. No, sir, this time it was silent. Did it wave its arm at you? No, sir, this time it covered its face with its hands, leaning up against the light like this. Did you attempt to go down to speak to it? Oh, no, sir. Well, I'll confess to you, sir, the sight of it this second time, it turned me quite faint inside, sir, because of what had happened before. I came back in here, sir. I had a drink of something, well, something a little stronger than a cup of tea, sir, to steady my nerves, if you get my meaning. Coffee? I suggested. Ah, as you wish, sir. Well, when I next went out to look, full daylight was above me, sir, and the spirit had gone. And did anything happen? I asked him this second time. That very day, sir. It was later that morning. The morning express was due. I was standing just by the line, all ready to wave it through. All was normal, sir. All was as it should have been. The train was on time. I even recognized the driver. But then, sir, as it sped past me from one of the carriage windows, I saw a confusion of heads and hands, and there was a cry for help. I ran down after the train, sir, calling out, "Stop!" to the driver. He put the brakes on, sir, but the train skidded on 100 yards or more, sir. There were more cries now, more screams for help. I ran to see if there was anything I could do, but it was too late. a young woman. Beautiful she was, sir. She had died, sir, just like that, in one of those carriages. Instantaneous, they called it, sir. Nobody could ever come up with a reason why. The poor thing, her body was carried in here, sir, to wait for the doctor, and it was placed down on the floor, sir, right where you're now standing. Now, sir, said the signalman, whose pain of mind was now so pitiful to see, but I could think of nothing to say to him to any purpose. Now, sir, you listen to the end of my story, and you will see how my mind and my heart is troubled. Because, sir, a week ago, the figure came back a third time. And it has been there ever since, in fits and starts. I have no rest, no peace for it, sir. It calls out, "Hello, below there, look out, look out!" It yells at me, sir. It waves its arm. I'm beginning to think, sir, that its warning must be to me. It has to be a warning, sir, that cannot be doubted, not after what happened the first 2 times. But what could I do to help? And what is the warning about? If I was to signal, sir, up and down the line, an alarm is beginning, so take care. The answer will come back, "What's the danger? Where's the danger?" I just have to say, "Well, I don't know, just for God's sake, take care." They would think I had lost my wits, sir. They'd take me out of my job here. I'd lose my place of work, and I'd be able to do no good at all. I'm beginning to think it's haunting me, sir, that its warning is to me. But what could it be about? What does it mean? Like I say, sir, I have had no peace. I have had no rest. It calls out, it waves its arm, it rings my little bell. "Ah," I said, I caught at this new piece of information. "Did it ring your bell this evening while the 2 of us were talking?" "Yes, sir, twice. And, forgive me," I said, when you went to look on those 2 occasions, did the figure appear to be there?" "It was there, so there is no appear about it. It was there." "In that case, my good man," I told him, "please allow me to reassure you. For my eyes have been upon the bell. My ears have certainly been open to its sound all evening. I can promise you, sir, that that bell did not ring on those 2 occasions that you have just mentioned." "Well, I don't wonder that you didn't hear it, sir. But I heard it. I heard it, and I have never been mistaken as to that sound yet, sir." Well, I felt it incumbent upon me. I felt it was my moral duty to stay with the signalman, to keep him company. I was not comfortable at all about leaving him alone in such a troubled state of mind, particularly in a position of such responsibility over the railway line. However, when I suggested this, he wouldn't hear of it. He insisted upon me returning to my hotel, but at least, he said, I would have a comfortable bed in which to spend the rest of the night. He did tell me that he had felt comforted and reassured by being able to talk to someone about his troubles. And I didn't leave him until I'd got him to agree to me returning again the next night. Well, once again, I said I would keep him company and we would talk some more. I gathered my things to leave. He stopped me in the doorway. Sir, when you get to the top of the embankment tonight, sir, don't feel as if you have to call down to let me know you're there. Just go back to your hotel. And tomorrow, sir, if you promise me, when you turn up, just come straight down. Don't call anything out." I gave him my word. I took my leave of him, still worried at his state of mind. I got to the top of the embankment. I remembered his injunctions to be silent and not to call out anything, but I couldn't resist looking down towards the line at him once more. I'd expected him to be shut up in his signal box, but there he stood by the line, gazing down towards the tunnel's mouth. I hurried away. Well, the next morning, it dawned bright and clear, a beautiful day, and I set off early from my hotel after breakfast in order to make the most of it. I spent a most pleasant few hours in a market town nearby, and towards the middle of the afternoon, when it was getting closer to my meeting the gentleman, I started to walk back across the fields and the woods towards the embankment where I'd first seen him. It really was the most delightful afternoon, and so those dreadful stories and the horrors of the night before seemed to come from a dream or another world. And it was with a light and a happy heart that I eventually arrived there and looked down at the line. And so imagine then my shock when I did look down to see that there, near to the line, there was the figure of a man. And he seemed to be, well, he was, waving. My shock only lasted a moment, for I saw this appearance of a man was a real man indeed, but standing close by him there was another group of gentlemen, and he seemed to be rehearsing this gesture to them. But then I noticed something else. Something else that had not been there the day before. Propped up next to the warning light was a small tent-like structure, covered by a single white sheet, no bigger than a bed. Now convinced that something dreadful had happened as a result of me leaving the signalman alone, I raced to the point where I'd made my descent the night before. Now, not worrying about my own safety, I tripped and stumbled my way down, calling out, "What's wrong? What's happened here?" "Signalman killed this afternoon, sir." "What? Oh no," I said, not the signalman belonging to that box there, not the man that I know." "You would recognize him, sir, if you did know him, for his poor face is quite composed and at rest." And one of the men lifted the sheet. "Oh. But how did this happen? How did this happen?" I said, turning from one to the other of them. "He was struck by an engine earlier, sir. It's strange, sir, because no man in England knew his job better, sir, but he was down. He must have been checking the warning light by the tunnel, sir, and it seemed he wasn't quite clear of the outside rail. Well, that man over there, sir, he was driving the engine that struck him, sir, and he was just showing us, explaining what had happened. Here, Tom. Tom. I know, my friend, I know. Just come and show this gentleman." Tom, the driver, stepped forwards. "It was dreadful, sir. Awful. I only saw him at the last moment, like, as we came around the final bend of the tunnel. And it was almost like looking down the wrong end of a telescope at him, if you get my meaning, sir. Well, I put the brakes on, sir, the moment I saw him. Strange, sir, because no man in England, sir, knew his job better. I could tell he wasn't clear of the outside rail. I don't even know what he was doing there at that time, sir. He shouldn't have been by the line, not by the tunnel, not when he knew there was a train due. The brakes were on full, sir, and I pulled down on the whistle, but he didn't seem to hear me. He didn't move. So I called out to him." You called out?" I said. "Yes, sir. Well, you know, like, as a warning." "What words did you use?" "Well, sir, I called out, 'Hello, below there! Look out, look out!' I shouted." He still hadn't moved, sir. The brakes were on full, but I could tell we weren't going to stop in time. Dreadful it was, sir. I had to lift my hand in front of my face at the end, so I didn't see. But I never stopped calling, sir, not until the very end. 'Hello, below there! Look out! Look out! For God's sake, clear the way!'" Thank you very much. that is the end of the story by Charles Dickens. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Now that is my version of the story. As I said earlier, one of the things I enjoy about doing performances of these sorts of classic stories is you can edit things. You can put in some of your own little details. It's possible to take out a lot of the original description, not because it isn't beautiful writing or it isn't really effective at creating an atmosphere, but when you're performing something, you can get a whole paragraph of description just by doing this. Yeah, or just by doing that. So that was my version. If you're interested in going to read the original version, I suppose the whole thing probably takes about 45 minutes, an hour to read the whole thing, but an amazing piece of writing. I think a wonderful story. Any comments or questions if we start with the staff?
Wow. I love the fact that it all comes full circle. And what do you make about the fact that the man who's telling the story has the same action? He has the same physical actions at the. So what do you make of that? What's your understanding of the meaning of that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever worked it out. What I think is creepy for me is that when you realize not only is he speaking the same words, but he's using the same actions, but for different reasons. I love that. It makes you go back to the beginning and say, I had the full glare of a late afternoon sun in my eyes, and I had to lift my hand in front of my face before I'd seen him at all. Hello, hello there. Hello, can I come down and talk to you? Which, of course, same word, the same action, but completely different meaning. I think one of the things at the time Dickens was writing this, which was in the early 1860s. I think it was first published. I could be, you might have to check that date. I sometimes get that date mixed up in my head. I think you've got a couple of members of staff who will remember better than me this. But at the time, there were a lot of Victorian writers who started to become interested in the supernatural and in natural phenomena and spiritual phenomena. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, and writing a little bit after Dickens, obviously, but he was very interested in the supernatural as well. And one of the theories at the time, I think I'm right in saying this, that Dickens was interested in was this idea that of ghosts appearing, of if something terrible had happened, if a violent thing had happened, whether it were a train accident, whether it were a sudden death or a murder perhaps, or a violent crime, a lot of people believe that it created such an energy in the air that energy hung around in the air afterwards. And some people think, well, maybe that is what we mean by somebody's spirit or somebody's ghost still being around. It's that energy that's created by an unnatural act, like a murder, a violent crime, or a tragic accident. So I think maybe he was playing around with those ideas, but I will admit I haven't really sussed it in my head. I just love that shiver that you get when you suddenly realise, oh, I know what's coming. Where it says, what words did you use? Some people listening this morning might have got, oh, I know exactly the words he used. It comes back to you. That's what I meant at the very beginning, about that little prickle or down your spine or your hair standing up on your neck. You suddenly go, oh, I get it. I know what's coming. Oh, no.
Miss Hill and Miss Burns, do you have any questions? Or Mr. Olsen as well, if you have any questions at all.
I was just thinking, obviously, it was 1866 it was published, and it was almost exactly a year after Dickens was there at the Staplehurst rail crash.
Yes.
If you had anything about that.
Yeah. I always want to say 1863 because it was Christmas Carol was 1843, and I've got that in my head. But yes, the crash. Where apparently, after helping to get other people from the train, Dickens went back on, I think, to get the manuscript, the only existing manuscript of, was it Our Mutual Friend? I think that he was taking.
It was one of the not very fun Dickens books he saved. I always remember it like that.
You know what I find really striking about this story, and I've never made the link before until I've seen you perform it, is Anthony Horowitz has written a short story called The Man with the Yellow Face, and it's all set in York Station, and a boy goes to a photo booth, and on his own he takes a photograph of himself because he's got a bit of spare cash to burn before he goes home. And in the photographs, there's two of him, and then the third photograph is a man with a yellow face, and then there's another photograph of him. And basically the whole story kind of centers around like who that man in the yellow face is, and it is all centered. It's really similar. And actually I wonder whether well, I wonder whether he was inspired by this story, because it just seems quite interesting, that kind of coming full circle.
I'm sure. I mean, I think, like we were saying before, about we had a question about, and I was talking about the different genres and different styles and tropes in these stories. That a lot of them do follow a similar pattern, and I think that you can hardly avoid dropping into some of those same patterns, because that's how these stories work so well. But I think Horowitz, was is a Dickens fan, so it wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't influenced. But yeah.
Now Henry's got his hand up. I'm not quite sure if he would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's popped it down. So there were a couple of other questions from last time, actually. So Jamie was saying, if you could perform one story for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's all right, Henry. No worries. Goodness me, that is such a hard question. If I had to choose just one, this would be in the top three, the one that I've just told you now, because I've been doing it for a long time anyway. I suppose it might be some Shakespeare. I did a one-man show based on Hamlet for a long time, and the reason I stopped doing that was I started to get too old to do it. I couldn't perform it in the same way in my early 50s as I did when I first started performing it in my early 30s. The knees wouldn't let me do it in the same way, so I got a bit clunky doing it. But that particular play, I would be happy to carry on doing that forever, because with Shakespeare as your basis for that play, and Shakespeare's fantastic language and ideas, you just keep finding new things in it all the time. So I think that's the answer. It's stuff that you can come back to and still be interested in yourself and still find new ideas and new ways of doing it.
Can I ask a question about performance? Because obviously we've been talking a lot about writing and what have you, but I wonder if you were going to give advice to people who are interested in getting into performance, much like what you do, and what would your advice be?
Well, at the age you are now, still as teenagers, I would say at the moment, get involved with as much performance theatre as you can. If your school is putting on a production or an event, try and get involved in some way, whether it's reciting or performing in a play. If there's a good youth theatre company that you can get to, check with parents, check with staff, get them to make sure it's a proper youth theatre or theatre group. Do as much as you can, and again, try to get to the theatre, try to see things when we're allowed to again, or download a lot of the live stream stuff from theatres. Watch a variety of actors. Think again about what sort of performer, what sort of actor you might want to be, and then maybe a course later on beyond at A-level and beyond, maybe, that mixes English literature, history, theatre all together, maybe. And also,
thank you. That's
the reasons you want to do it as well. Be honest with yourself. If you just want to act and perform because you want to be rich and famous, choose anything. But if you want to do it because you love and you're just fascinated by the work and you love doing it and you can't imagine yourself being happy doing anything else, then go for it. But you have to be honest with yourself for your reasons why you want to do it.
That's very sage advice. Thank